Welcome to the Ascension Path with Twin Essence. I'm Lacey.
And I'm Marley, and we're your Starseed Lightworker and Psychic Medium hosts.
We're identical twins with spiritual abilities and Starseed missions on Earth. On the Ascension Path, we discuss what it's like to be identical twins serving in a spiritual capacity and provide insights into our work as Starseeds. We create a sacred space to receive channeled messages, intuitive teachings, and expansive conversations that elevate your frequency and support your evolution. Join us to learn about navigating the path to Ascension and becoming the most authentic, aligned version of you. Take what resonates and leave the rest. Welcome, everyone. We are talking all about the creation of Earth today, also known as Earth's Inception. So, how did we get here? What are we doing here? Who is actually pulling the strings? And what is the point of all of this? This is a great episode for all the philosophical healers out there who are like, how is the universe created? Is the Big Bang Theory real? Or just questioning like what everything means as it relates to starseeds and source and consciousness, because I feel like it really dives into a lot of those lingering questions. So let's start with the very beginning, and that is source. So we are all from source, right? We already know this. Everybody is connected together. We talk about unity consciousness and everybody being part of the whole. And we also talk about polarization and reaching that point of integration where we're balanced between positive and negative polarities. Now, the theory that Lacey and I channel and resonate most with, which you will find a number of theories out there from different healers or different channels, is that source essentially had a thought one day, let's put it that way, where source said, what would it feel like to not be integrated in polarities, and instead have to experience different extremes of polarities and work your way back to a point of integration? And essentially, as we resonate with this theory, that is what created this fragmentation, and some people will refer to it as the Big Bang Theory, maybe. But that created a fragmentation where source essentially split off into all these different galactic founders, if you will. And this really gets into the power of co-creation and thought, because the thought alone was so powerful that it just happened instantly, and all these fragments went out there. And when we talk about the fragments or the galactic founders, these are really the different types of star beings that are out there. So when we talk about galactic founders, we're typically referring to Lyrans, Sirians, Arcturians, Pleiadians, Andromedans, Zeta Reticuli. I know they're often listed as a founder as well. And there's some channels out there where they have very specific founders, like it's only 7 or it's only 5. But generally speaking, for Lacey and I, we resonate most with just these main starseed types being the founders. We don't necessarily have a specific number of that. We just listed many because we believe there are many that could be considered founders. The other thing to remember when we talk about Earth's inception and source fragmenting is that it's this time-space construct that we're stuck in the 3D reality. So I feel like oftentimes you're going to hear us talking through things and it's going to sound very linear, and that's not the case. Really, everything's happening all at once. Source had the thought, everything fragmented, and then there we go. We have our starseed lineages out there existing, which we call the galactic founders. So the galactic founders are that starting point, and then from there, things branch off even further into different civilizations, into the creation of Earth, into how these different lineages work with humanity. Linear thought processes are really more of a 3D belief system and construct, so it's hard to explain these things in a very human way. It comes off sounding that way, but we all know that time is not this linear spectrum only. You'll notice Lacey and I use the term galactic founders. There are a lot of other channels out there who talk about channeling the Galactic Federation, and we really don't resonate with that terminology. Lacey and I feel that using terminology like the Federation immediately assumes this like government hierarchical structure, which again places us back into that linear thought processes or binary roles and identities. And it doesn't resonate with us. We don't feel that when we channel, it's coming from a place of authority, if you will, authority in a sense of government. Like they're telling us how things are, they're telling us what to do. That doesn't resonate with us. Really, it's just their founders. They are the purest fragment closest to source before everything continued to fragment further into this human race that we are. And now we're seated. Now we're seated on Earth. Galactic Federation just isn't our preferred terminology, and it just is trying to give order to something that doesn't necessarily need that order, so to speak. Even the term galactic, we use galactic founder, but it feels quite masculine energetically and in nature, which is why we often use the phrase cosmic more often to describe things than not. It's more of the feminine term, and it's just what feels better for the two of us when we talk about these things. I think too, serving as channels and Starseed Lightworkers, we really don't like putting things into that 3D box. I feel like that defeats the purpose of what we do. The work that we do is higher consciousness, it's a higher dimensionality. So we're not going to use terms like federation. We're not going to try to put a government structure on it. Instead, just know that they are founders, they are elders, and we are all connected. We are all from source. Now, one of the other visuals they're pulling through is this praying mantis visual. And oftentimes, founders or elders, those closest fragments to source, can be seen and depicted as praying mantis type beings. They're usually going to be energy sources, like light sources. You're not necessarily going to see physicality, but if you do see those images in your mind, oftentimes they have that praying mantis image, which Lacey and I have encountered since our Starseed awakenings in the 3D reality. At the time, we didn't really think of it as a Starseed experience, but learning more, channeling more, understanding that really that bug-like praying mantis visual is kind of the first ancestral form of different star beings. We actually had an experience last summer where we attracted praying mantis to our lavender plants, which just is not common for the two of us, and we've never seen one. I mean, those from all over that are listening, we are based in Wisconsin right now. And it's not that they don't exist in Wisconsin, it's just that we don't typically see them out in nature. And one day we go out there and there's this praying mantis just chilling out on our lavender plant. And then after that first incident, we started seeing them everywhere. It was really weird. It was definitely a message from our star families, but we started seeing them everywhere we would go outside. There'd be a little praying mantis hanging out by plants. And so it's been really interesting to see how we receive those messages and how they come into our 3D reality, even. Continuing on our trajectory as we talk about source fragmenting and we talk about galactic founders, we'll start off speaking more heavily about Lyran lineages and Sirian lineages. No surprise, Lacey as the Lyran Starseed and me as the Sirian Starseed, but they're very connected. So there are a lot of different channels out there that will tell you Lyra was the oldest and the first of all the star beings, and everything that shot out of Lyra is really what it all came out of Lyra. But as we just talked about that time and that linear concept, we don't necessarily believe that. We believe that the founders fragmented, and that's where kind of creation, the beginning of creation began all at once. Lyra really is one of the oldest constellations, and we have Lyra and we have Vega. So being one of the earliest planets that had inhabitants on it, we had these two different planets in this constellation, and you've heard us talk about this, but the whole point of all of this was about integration and harmonization. So that balance point of these two different ends of the spectrum in polarization, positive, negative. And Vega is, I think it's the brightest star within the Lyra constellation. So no surprise that we see this interaction happening within the Lyra constellation itself, and that the brightest star is having a unique identity form. And as time was moving, we know that polarity is how all of us learn and grow. We know that's the whole point of this thought experiment, this whole thought process with source fragmenting and creating these. So what we started to see was Lyra was on the more positive end, and Vega tended to be on the more negative end of the polarization. That started to create a lot of tension that led to a lot of conflict. So when you hear different channels talk about the Lyran Wars, they are really referring to the war between Vega and Lyra and the two different polarities not getting along. Now, it's very important that you understand there was no right or wrong on either side of these planets. They both just had extreme views of how to do things and how to reach that point of integration. Because as we know, there is no right or wrong when it comes to polarization. They both had their own ideas of doing and ways of doing things, but they thought they had the right way. And this is what really led to that conflict between the two. When you're researching and you're looking up Lyran Starseeds, it's not uncommon to immediately see Lyran Wars pop up. And this is really what this is. It's the conflict between the negative and positive polarities showing up within a constellation out there in the galaxy. Does it sound familiar at all to the 3D reality that we live in? um, what ultimately ended up happening is war creates conditions that are very unpleasant to live within. So many Lyrans began fleeing to other star systems and other planets to actually live and coexist. And this is where our friend Sirius enters the picture. So some Lyrans ended up fleeing to Sirius. And this is where we start to see an integration. This is where we start to see like a crossbreed almost. Crossbreed between different starseed lineages and different points of integration between different constellations and planets. So Sirius is known as the dog star. If you're looking at Greek mythology, the dog leads the way for Orion on his hunt. And Sirius is a binary star system. So if you look up in the 3D reality, it's been known to be a binary star system. But there is some hypotheses out there that it really is a trinary star system, and that there was a third star at some point in time that maybe was destroyed or converted or changed. In my channelings, I haven't really necessarily seen it as there being a third star. I do definitely think it's binary, but I do think it's heavily related to the sun. We know that because they always call Sirius the spiritual sun. But Lyrans fled to Sirius, and they fled to other planets as well. But when we talk about them fleeing to Sirius, this coincides directly with astral realm experiences I've had, different dreams, and even my QHHT session that I had, where I had seen essentially me as a Sirian being welcoming Lyrans onto the planet I was living on. That's one of the messages I've received about how Lacey and I met originally in our different incarnations. And me, it was all about fleeing from a place that was no longer inhabitable. And that's how I met Marley on Sirius for a time being. And that is where Marley always gets those visuals of an explosion on a planet. You've always talked about that, where you get these explosions on a different planet that you're like watching from afar. That's really all about those Lyran wars that were experienced and having to flee to find refuge somewhere else. And many fled underground in Lyra. So I often have dreams and astral realm experiences as well, where I am underground fighting like a war or like hiding and helping other beings during a war. So that really coincides too with these channel messages that make sense to not only confirm the Lyran war, but also confirm Lyrans did flee to Sirius and how Lacey and I ultimately met. Spoiler alert, this is not the first time these events will actually occur and happen. As we talk about Earth's inception and the different star beings that really make up where we come from and how we were seeded. Now, when we talk about the Elders of Sirius, this is where we start to see experimentation happening with a 3D density and reality. So this is they're trying to create this level of physicality that many starseeds didn't necessarily have. Many of them were only existing as energy forms or light forms. Part of the reason we believe that the elders started experimenting with the 3D reality and these forms of physicality is because, again, on Sirius, we started to see these different conflicts or combustions happen with the different polarities. And so I think the thought process from the elders is we can't contain this at the high level we're at, this high density we're at. It's not being contained. We are not reaching a point of integration, and we're not moving back to source yet. So if we move down to a 3D density or reality into a more physical form, perhaps we can achieve a point of integration faster. And then you'd be able to ascend to the higher densities and be able to reach a point of balance. We'll go back to source and voila, this experiment is complete. The mission, the project, everything has been completed successfully. Sounds really easy, but of course, it's not as simple as that. We see the origin of this really starting with the Lyran Wars, moving to Sirius and outward as we start to actually look and channel on these different star systems, starting with Sirius, how they go down to that third density. Different beings from Lyra and Vega came to Sirius as well. So it's important to note that we had different elders and leaders that did come and flee to Sirius during these conflicts that were arising between the two planets. So as we see these different beings within Sirius and we see these different conflicts occurring now, because now we're getting, again, extreme polarities combusting together, I want to make it clear that not everybody is in conflict. There is teamwork and collaboration happening between Lyrans and Sirians and between other beings as well. Because again, other beings are fleeing from their planets because they don't like that conflict. Maybe if I move here, it'll be more stable. And from here, we really start to transition over to the Orion saga. So we're not going to go any further on that point in the story of Inception, but let's talk a little bit about traits that we see across Lyrans, Vegans, and Sirians as we talk about Starseeds and Starseed lineages. Starting with our very favorite, Lyrans. Maybe Lacey's favorite, not my favorite. So we've talked about Lyrans before, but we know they come with more of a cat-like or feline physical form. Not all the time, because I've talked about how I see my star family, and they often just look like light pink beings, very similar to the pillow that I'm holding. But sometimes they do come in a cat-like feline form. And one of the very interesting parts about being a Lyran is they often have this sense of urgency to complete a task as fast as possible and then make it back to source. It's almost like they forget to have flexibility in what they're doing, and then they just want to go really, really fast, get back to source, complete it as fast as possible, get back to source. And I often will even experience that as a Lyran myself, where I don't want to give myself room to experience things or go off course or take the off beaten path, because I'm like, well, I'm here to get this done and I want to get done as soon as possible because that's the task and that's the mission. Let's get back to source. So that's a very common thing that I even experience as a Lyran, and I often see it with other Lyrans that we read as well. They also have strong warrior energy, as you can imagine, coming from a planet that did have more combustion, maybe more conflict, I would say, than Sirius, actually. They have that warrior energy, though, so they bring to it 110%, no bars held, they go hard, and they also have a heavy leadership trait. Now, if that wasn't obvious enough, Lacey started off by being like, our favorite Starseed type. I'm like, that is the most Lyran thing ever. It's not my favorite Starseed type. It's not who I am. And there she goes, speaking for the collective again. That's a Lyran Starseed, everybody. As opposed to a Sirian Starseed who's like, we're not all bad. We're positive too. No, Sirians are not bad. I mean, I don't think any Starseed type is bad. Some are more negatively polarized than others, though, which is fine. It just means they serve self more than serving others. But we see that leadership trait coming through. We see the warrior energy coming through. That's why when they're passionate about something, they're willing to go hard. This is that ride or die energy, is how I'll describe it. Whereas Sirians sometimes get lumped into the more negatively polarized Orion group. And so there's Orion and Sirians, bad reps. They tend to get more of a bad rep sometimes. They really do. And so Marley always gets riled up about that. If it doesn't make Sirius look positive, then she gets all frustrated with it. Well, they make it seem so negative. I just feel like there's sources online that make it seem very negative, and that's not the case. Sirians are really, like, I think of that elder word. I think about them being elders, and I think about them being very collective oriented. Look at them coming up with that 3D reality, saying maybe we can reach a point of integration if we do this. So I just think of them as being very collective oriented. Not that Lyrans aren't. Lyrans just have a heavy warrior leadership energy. And again, it goes back to what Lacey said about wanting to complete things as fast as possible. Whereas I think Sirians are more like, look at the resources we have, look at the information we have, what makes sense collectively.
So it's two different ways to look at things coming together, collaborating, I think making a more cohesive approach as it relates to maybe councils that we look to for guidance on in the earthly realm.
With Sirians, we know that they have more of that aquatic and ocean energy, often being associated with whales and dolphins. So that is how they appear to me, and they often take on that half animal, half humanoid figure or shape when they appear or when you interact with them. And I've talked about this before. My interactions with Sirian, they're always half animal, half human. I see them all the time like that in the astral realm. My dreams are like that. My QHHT, it came through in that manner. So that's often how I see them. And it makes sense because I do connect to a whale as a spirit animal. So again, it goes back to that Sirian origin I have. One of the things that we do want to talk about as it relates to Sirians and Earth's inception actually comes from the Egyptian culture, because we know that Sirians used to actually take on these humanoid forms to visit Earth and walk among humans. And that goes back to that 3D reality or density concept again. So Sirians experimenting with what could this look like if we were physically visible? What could this look like in a 3D reality or density? It would make sense then that as we talk about Earth being created in these civilizations, that they're choosing to zap down into Earth and say, we're going to appear as Egyptian gods. We're going to communicate with humanity. We're going to help them progress. We have to do it in a way that it is going to be acceptable to them, because that veil of forgetfulness exists on Earth, as we all know, in this 3D reality. And when we talk about these Egyptian gods, we're talking Isis, we're talking Anubis. These are the forms that they would actually take to walk among the humans. And that is where the culture got their worship of these gods and when they would come down and walk among them. And now, obviously, there is no way to necessarily scientifically or factually confirm all of these things. But let's be real, there weren't cameras back then. You can look through all the historical texts that you would like to look through, but that doesn't exactly explain every single thing that we know of that time period and those civilizations. We know they were quite advanced, actually, technologically speaking, and in social ways. But we do know there has been like carvings and hieroglyphs and things found that do lead towards a more spiritual side of things and lead towards coming from the sky. I guess that's the way I'll say it, is how I receive it.
Yeah. It definitely resonates with us and the information we receive when we channel with them. This is what we know to be true within our channelings. And it makes sense. It makes sense with the story of that 3D reality and the elders, and it makes sense with the spirituality involved in like ancient Egypt. They also assisted with Mayan cultures. Lacey and I have seen Mayan sites. Makes sense that we're attracted to them energetically and code wise on Earth in the grid. But also, there's speculation that Sirius is where that crystal skull came from as it relates to Mayan cultures. And they believe that, or how it's been shared with us, is that there's possibly codes within that skull, or it sits as a reminder for humanity to say there's something beyond us, that this was created.
So the other type of being that we want to talk to before we bring it back to creating Earth and the groups that were actually involved with that process and the purpose of it, we just want to cover vegan starseeds as well. So vegan starseeds, sometimes they get that bad rep of being more of a negatively polarized star being, but that's just not accurate, because we've had plenty of clients where we've channeled vegan star beings as their star family. So typically they come off with a more hardened exterior, I will say, but they also have a softness about how they go about things and a level of confidence with what they're bringing through.
And I think to vegans, remember, they existed within the Lyra constellation, so they do heavily overlap with Lyrans. Even though we saw the conflict of polarities there, looking at it as an observer from the outside, I still see heavily Lyran traits existing within them. They tell me like we're like steel. That's how they describe it to me. They have their opinions. They are strong. They are firm. Again, that warrior energy, that leadership energy. They want to do it their way. But to Lacey's point, oftentimes when we channel and we connect a vegan starseed to those origins, it feels softer now. Softer as it relates to Earth, softer in their approach and how they design the incarnations for their seeds. I know there was one where it was like heavily earth oriented. It was like a green energy. It was very connected to Gaia. It felt oftentimes like they were moving in and out of a fairy realm. I see that soft side coming through of they too can care about the collective and the whole. They too can care about Gaia. So we shouldn't be putting them into these binary roles of it's this or that. It can be they've reached further progress on their path to be where they are now and how they're integrating and incarnating on Earth.
They do come off as less diplomatic, I'll say, than a Lyran does necessarily, but they are nonetheless confident in what they're doing. They are here to help humanity move forward and ascend just like any other star being is. And really, when we talk about these things, it's also important to note that we refer to star seeds as the humans, us on Earth, and star beings are the ones that planted us as seeds here. So we're their star seeds. Just wanted to make sure that was clear for everyone as well. And moving back to Earth's inception with these groups that we're talking about, really, when Earth was created with this purpose of integration, balance, how we take these extreme polarities and we can reach that point of integration. So when they were creating Earth, it was a planet that existed, but it wasn't necessarily inhabited by souls or beings. We know that different star beings did go there to do testing, getting it prepared, Yes.
helping the planet grow into what it needed to be to inhabit that 3D physical form being created.
And we know that a lot of that happened with early primitive species that existed on Earth. But when they actually were like, hey, let's bring humans here, or let's bring souls here to incarnate and start this process of ascension all over again, because we've tried it a million different ways and it's sure as shit not working. And we'll talk about those different ways on different episodes.
And again, bearing in mind that veil of forgetfulness, they're not going to know anything, they're not going to remember this. And the 3D density being even more dense, lowering that density, then we see a complete transformation in what they actually remember as opposed to the cosmic lifetimes maybe that they lived.
Lyrans, Sirians, and the Galactic Founders got together and created a game plan to essentially bring souls to Earth and start this 3D level ascension and on process, which we always call Earth School or Project Earth, whatever phrase you feel resonates for you. But these groups got together and were like, okay, how can we get to integration with a different, completely new planet that doesn't have the same memories that we do? Because it's not working. What we're doing right now is not working. We continue to see these conflicts occur between extreme polarities, and that is Earth. We want to be clear too. As humans, we do have the memories of what happened, but they're encoded in our DNA, and a lot of us, or a big group of us, still haven't woke up to actually remember these memories. But the women we work with who are on Starseed journeys and Ascension journeys, we go through that process of remembering where you came from, what your soul remembers. We don't remember because the veil of forgetfulness, but as we know with Earth's ascension right now, more and more of us are waking up and remembering what our soul actually knows and remembers. So they created Earth and this 3D playground, so to speak, where souls can incarnate, forget about things, and learn how to learn and grow on Earth and actually ascend. They also did bring the Palladians in at a different point because the Palladians saw benefit in working with humans and decided to take part in this bigger experiment of Earth school. So remember that all galactic founders have a role in this creation of Earth. We call forward the Lyrans and Sirians because they are really the beginning steps of that process. Palladians as well are heavily involved. Everybody has a role at some point through the galactic founders in this creation of Earth. But when we actually talk about channeling, who we channel, and how Earth is created, Lyrans and Sirians are heavily spearheading this ploy to create this 3D reality and this planet so that we can maybe achieve integration. Maybe we lower the density and we can achieve integration in this way, in this physical form.
As we go, we'll continue to pull in different galactic founder groups in the coming episodes so that you can see what role they played in Earth and learn a little bit more about them and the inner workings of their planets, because they have just as much interesting things going on as Lyra and Sirius has.
The other thing I do want to bring up that they are reminding me of is I was on a social media account for someone who does different work in the galactic realm. And on one of their posts, there was a very angry person. Like, what kind of school is Earth if you forget things and don't remember lessons? And they were ranting in a very negative way about how they believe we were all trapped in this negative cycle and this isn't a school. This is horrible. And I thought, like, wow, it struck me. This is very negative. And, but I was also, this is a very interesting belief system and take to have on this Project Earth or Earth School concept. But what I channeled and realized with Spirit and my star family was they basically said it in very simple terms to me. They said, what exam do you take that you've already had all the pre-answers, like the answers for it already given to you? What exam have you ever taken where the answers have literally been handed to you? That's just not how it works. So that was the analogy they used to explain this Project Earth to us and understand that it does serve a purpose for learning and growth and integration. And it is like a bigger exam. It is a school. So you can be really angry at it and view it as a negative thing, or you can view it as a positive thing that we all get to experience and evolve through. So to bring it back, we talk about Source having this thought and creating these fragments that become the galactic founders. And from there, we talk about this creation of Earth and this 3D density that we are all experiencing. Spirit shows me that this is like a rainbow. Some people actually believe there is a prism that created the galactic founders and caused Source to fragment. It's called the Prism of Lyra. They think it is. Of course, they think they're the center of the world, but whoa, wow, shade on the pod, everybody. This is the dynamic sometimes with a Sirian and a Lyran. I just realized we're both wearing our color. Look, you're wearing pink and I'm wearing blue too. Yes, like wow, this is not even planned. This is like so Sirian and Lyran right now. Yes, as we recorded this episode, we did not intentionally plan that. And then we had this little green being too in between us now. It represents a point of integration. Yeah. For those that watch on YouTube, we have a little pink and blue spaceship planter, and there was this little green being that we created to sit in it for podcasting, and he's like our little representative of all the other founders that we're not having on the call right now. Yeah. But where I was going with this is they describe it as a rainbow to me, being that Source fragmented and it created this. And that's where we see these different Starseed lineages and the galactic founders appear. So this rainbow is created, and we see each color within that rainbow representing galactic founders. Now, I believe there's more than 7, okay? I believe there's many. I'm not going to put a number to it. I think it would be naive to go into anything as a channel and say, well, I know there's 5 founders or I know there's 7 founders. I think there's many. I think there are many out there in the universe. And they just show me that as those different colors representing those different founders when Source fragmented and we created Earth to where we are now. The way my star family has described it to me as a little analogy that has been brought through in different sessions with clients that are trying to understand this is they actually use the example of a variety cheesecake and how each flavor in that variety cheesecake is a different founder or starseed lineage, star family, if you will, starseed type. Each piece, these flavors are different type, and we are the little fragments that come off like a little sliver of that flavor of cheesecake that comes off of that starseed lineage. That's a 3D example for you. If you can't visualize the rainbow being created, keeping us in an energy form and light, the cheesecake is another 3D example of what this Source fragmentation is, each slice being a founder. Then going within each slice, we're able to break off even further into these seeds being created. And really, you should think about what flavor of cheesecake you want to be, where did you come from? And how interesting is that flavor? Do you want to be a plain slice of cheesecake? Zeta reticulum? I don't know.
I'm not throwing shades at any other type of Starseed lineage. We're just joking around. This is just like a nice little banter between the founders right now.
Yeah, like, do we need to create a guide where each being is a different flavor of cheesecake now? I don't know. Maybe we're going to do that now. But the whole point is to understand where you came from and what your flavor is, or if you're a mixture of flavors, because that's possible. And as we progress in these next episodes, we are going to dig further into different star beings and these different lineages and really where they come from, what they're like, and what they're all about. Because as we've been doing more and more twin magic readings, we are channeling more and more star beings. And people need these resources. They want to understand their origins better. So we've got all the good things coming from the mainstream star beings of Andromedans, Arcturians, and Palladians, all the way to the lesser, more niche star beings of Nihals, Anunnakis, and other kinds, because there is no one size fits all approach. We're all just trying to understand our cosmic origins and where we came from and what makes our mission and purpose in this incarnation unique.
No being is too small to be a part of the discussion. That, my friends, is where we create this collective cohesion as starseeds on Earth right now.
As we wrap up today, we do want to plug our Starseed disclosure calls, which right now are a monthly free offering where we provide channeled messages for the collective on Ascension events that are happening and unfolding right now in the world.
We talk about a little bit of everything for the collective. It could be global leaders, it could be political, it could be related to control, different themes that we see happening within 3D structures and processes, and how that is impacting you and where you should be putting your energy right now as it relates to your own personal ascension path.
It's not about being polarizing for the sake of being polarizing, but really helping you with where to put your energy during this wildly chaotic time and the divine orchestration of how it's all unfolding.
And if you're looking to work with us one-on-one, head over to our website, twinessence.com, and you can check out our offerings of twin magic readings, or if you're a little further on your path, looking at more starseed integration and alignment. If you watched on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so that we can continue to create for you.
And buckle up, because we've got some very fun information and messages coming directly from the cosmos in the next several episodes.